So I am most honored and very, very privileged to welcome Jonathan Farrington, sales futurist and creator of JF Initiatives. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you, Lisa. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
And so Jonathan is a keynote speaker, business coach, mentor to many people, including myself, and a sales futurist. And I thought he was the perfect person to be able to kick off today's Evolve Sales Leaders Think Tank. Jonathan is also the CEO of JF Initiatives, the parent company of Top Sales World, Top Sales Magazine, and the Sales Futurist. So as you will notice, Jonathan actually is living outside of the UK. So we actually want to say good afternoon to you, Jonathan, rather than saying good morning. And you'll notice that we will not be able to see Jonathan live, his video, because he is living in the most cute area of England. And unfortunately, his internet bandwidth is not strong enough to show his video. However, Jonathan and I had the privilege of having a great conversation last week. And just by listening to his voice, all of you will want to lean in a little bit because what he has to say is absolutely incredible, impeccable, and well worth the insights. So welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you again, Lisa.
So Jonathan, as a sales futurist, what do you see changing the most in sales beyond 2021?
Well, it's a question that's certainly kept us up late at night, more often than not recently. Obviously, the pandemic forced the buyer-seller relationship online, and I believe that those organizations who survived the best and are even beginning to thrive again now are the ones who adapted and transitioned the fastest. Mm-hmm. And because, you know, the reality is that digitization was going to happen. It's always been an inevitable, but COVID simply accelerated its arrival by, in my opinion, probably 5 years. But I must add this, you know, you can automate as much of your sales and marketing process as you want, but you can never automate relationships. Now, looking ahead, unlike many of my peers who believe that selling is going totally inside, I see the arrival of a hybrid frontline sales professional who will totally embrace all the advantages that technology gives them, but at the same time, be prepared for face-to-face sales events when their prospect or their customer or their client requires them. But I do believe those occasions will most likely be reserved for important milestones in the buying process, like, for example, the initial exploratory meeting and the final contract negotiations. Mm-hmm. So the question for business captains is not when will sales go back to normal. The question is, how quickly can you modernize so that you can embrace the future of sales and come out of COVID ready to take on the new, fast, always online, customer-centric, content-rich, and technology-enabled world of modern buying and selling?
Jonathan, I liked what you said there. You called our sales leaders sales captains, and that's exactly what they need to do. They need to be navigating their own ship right now. So great. And you're right. I mean, who would have thought that we would have been able to do a global virtual conference like we're doing here? You're right. Technology and this pandemic has been able to accelerate the use of technology.
Yes. Oh, yes, most certainly.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, in our conversation, you shared with me that you've been conducting some research on what buyers want. Can you share with us some of those key highlights? Can you give us a sneak peek of what you've been able to find out so far?
Well, yes, I will, Lisa, but I also want to make this point, which I know that you certainly agree with. We see lots of statements, lots of commentaries. We listen to lots of webinars, read lots of articles telling us how selling is going to be in the future. And indeed, earlier on, I made my own statements, but I've made my statements by listening to buyers as well, because we cannot, as sellers, dictate the way the future of buying and selling is going to be. Okay, buyers have to tell us. We have to listen to our buyers more than ever before, and we have to sell to them in a way that they wish to be sold to. We cannot dictate. It's as simple as that. Now, it's been suggested that buyers are now more commercially promiscuous than ever before, and they no longer value long-term relationship with vendors. And I'm sure you've heard that too, Lisa.
Absolutely, yes.
Actually, not so. In responding to the following question, and I'm just giving you a taster here, a couple of snippets from this latest piece of research, which will be available in June, by the way.
Okay, good.
So we asked the question, thinking about your current list of suppliers, how important is it to create long-term symbiotic relationships? Well, a massive 86% told us that it was important. And in fact, 55% suggested that it was very important. Now, a second and final snippet for you, Lisa. Another question we asked, in your personal experience, do you feel that the relevance and importance of sales professionals to your future purchasing requirements will increase, decrease, or stay the same? 46.1% told us it'll stay the same. 43% told us it would increase or significantly increase, and only 9.8% said it would decrease. Now, again, we read the commentary everywhere that the younger generations don't want to be sold to, and a very highly respected research house even came out with a statement on this. Well, guess what, guys? We old people don't like being sold to either. Nobody has ever enjoyed being sold to. And the message that we're getting from buyers today is we need sales professionals, but we no longer wish to be part of the audience. We want to be part of the process. And if you want to sell to me and understand my business and my company.
I really like and I think that that's an important message that, and I'll be talking about it a little bit later, where we still see so many salespeople trying to sell too soon and not understand or even fully understand the buyer's business.
Yeah, absolutely right. And to attempt to sell to every single buyer, every single client, customer, and prospect in the same way is sheer stupidity, frankly. We all believe that we're different in the world. So, and certainly every company is different in the world. Every buyer is different in the world. They have different criteria, different needs, different personalities, and we have to be adaptable.
Absolutely. So what I want to be able to let everyone know is Jonathan will be available for a few questions towards the end of his interview here. So if you have any questions specifically for Jonathan, you can start to queue them up in the chat box, because I know that some of you are quite intrigued with what Jonathan is sharing. So if you have some questions, you can certainly put them in the chat box, and we'll have a few minutes at the end of today's conversation. So Jonathan, you're saying all these things, and I've been training salespeople for almost 20 years. And you mentioned there are 3 different levels of salespeople, because most salespeople think they're doing a good job. They think they're understanding their customers' needs. So can you actually share the reality of the 3 different levels of salespeople?
Yes, I will, Lisa, and I'll be as brief as possible because I know time is moving on. In fact, one of your other guests, Dave Keller, and I often discuss this because these percentages haven't changed in years. We believe that only 5% of professional salespeople reach and remain at the highest level, which we call level 3. A further 15% attain level 2 status, but the majority, i.e. a massive 80%, remain at level 1 in terms of potential achievement. So again, briefly by way of explanation, level 1 people sell products and depend on having the right technical solution for the customer specification. Level 2 salespeople sell solutions, which changes their image from sales rep to business consultant and positions them as a potential strategic resource. Most salesmen and women manage to advance from level 1 to level 2 fairly easily, but unfortunately, many find breaking through that final glass ceiling extremely difficult. In other words, moving from competitive sales professionals to collaborative sales consultants. Now, right at the top end, level 3 salespeople are able to first identify and then capitalize upon the political component within the buying process. They develop and they sustain strong commercial relationships at all levels within their accounts. These relationships endure because they're based on mutual respect and trust. Their clients feel secure, in fact, so secure that they would be fearful of changing supplier. Level 3 salespeople rarely, if ever, lose an order that they really want because they're always in control of the sales cycle. They've identified in a marketplace where product uniqueness and technical expertise are no longer enough. It is themselves that make the difference, i.e. their superior skills. But, you know, finally on this, what I would say is I fully appreciate that most organizations will not necessarily need to populate their sales teams with level 3 performers, even if they could find and afford them. There will always be tasks, functions, and indeed markets where level 2 or even level 1 salesmen and women can comfortably exceed expectations. But what is absolutely important, of paramount importance, is that we ensure that we have the right level where we need it most. In other words, round pegs in round holes. Because if an organization is attempting to compete in a market sector where level 3 skills are required, and yet their team is predominantly at level 2 in terms of expertise, experience, and development, they're unlikely to consistently win the business that they need in order to fulfill their financial ambitions.
Very interesting, Jonathan. So we've got sales leaders here in the audience, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about these different levels of selling. What do you think sales leaders need to do in order to address this 3 different levels of selling in this reality?
Well, I think that essentially, you know, they've got to arm themselves. They've got to arm their teams with the skills that are going to be required as we move forward. They absolutely have to do that and give them the weaponry that they'll need. Now, what does that mean? Well, essentially, it means recognizing the changes in both their short-term and long-term competitive landscape and really adjusting their strategy accordingly. It means getting closer to the team and remaining close. And what has to happen, they have to rigorously re-examine every aspect from onboarding to implementing a wholly appropriate reskill, upskill program, because I believe that even though we are more than 12 months on from the arrival of COVID, more than 60% of frontline sales managers do not have such a plan in place. And in excess of 50% have not assessed their people against the skills that they'll need for the future. And I'd further add that they face 2 other blatantly obvious major challenges.
What are those challenges?
Well, around 70% of sales leaders have not received training on how to lead remotely, and more than half of frontline sales professionals have not been adequately trained in how to sell remotely. And that's just 2 prime examples.
And when you said that sales leaders need to get closer, they're probably thinking, how do I do that when I have to do it remotely? Or how do I evaluate my team? You know, those are big challenges for sales leaders.
Well, yeah, they are challenges, Lisa, but, you know, I took more than 12 months. We're 14 months coming on for 15 months on from COVID's arrival. You know, again, the companies that are succeeding and even thriving today are the ones that transition quickly. And these are skills that should have been taken on board by now. And so it's a sad indictment and reflection on the sales leadership environment, isn't it?
Yes, yes. The other interesting thing that you shared with me is the tenure of sales leaders. So what is the average tenure of a sales leader?
Well, the average tenure at the moment hasn't changed very much over the past 5 years. It's still 18 months, Lisa.
18 months. So that doesn't give them a lot of time to be able to make that transformation with their team.
Well, no, it doesn't. And, you know, the main reason for this is because when the vacancy arises, traditionally, organizations, CEOs appoint the best performing salesperson on the sales floor into management. because they believe it's natural progression. And yet the skills, as you know only too well, Lisa, the skills required to manage a well-performing sales team are completely different to being a top-performing salesperson. And when this happens, there are two obvious, pitfalls. First of all, you take your best-performing salesperson off the sales floor, and as a result, the overall sort of sales team results plummet. And secondly, you hamstring the sales team with an underqualified, inexperienced, and inappropriate manager in many cases. And it is simply because CEOs are not thinking ahead. They're not thinking, well, this guy, this girl is obviously the next sales manager in waiting. Let's get them some training over a couple of years so that they're ready to step in. How many sales teams do you know that have got a deputy sales manager, for example, so that you've got a smooth transition should the sales manager leave or be pushed? And I think, it's so easy to criticize sales managers, but they're in a very, very, very difficult place right now. And I think they need all the help they can get, which is, as you know, is why we're launching Top Sales Leadership in the next few days.
A deputy sales manager. That's an interesting concept. And some CEOs and companies will say, how can I justify this? So what do you see as the role of the deputy sales manager or the leader in waiting is what I'm hearing you say?
Well, you talk in terms of justifying. I mean, does justification really need to take place? If you've identified someone with that level of ambition, they're not going to be asking for a lot more money. They're not going to be asking for another car. It's the kudos of the position. And the terms in value to the CEO of having someone ready to step in at very short notice, who's properly qualified, properly trained, understands that sales team. I mean, you can't put a price on that.
And yet we talk about stepping up and improving and strengthening the bench strength. You're right. The sales leadership role with the second person in command is a great way to be able to do that. And the other thing is when we look at coaching, so many more salespeople need coaching. This is a great opportunity for this deputy or second in command sales leader to really hone their coaching skills to develop the skills of the salesperson.
Well, yes, of course. I agree with you, Lisa. It's the most important attribute, in my opinion, that a sales leader can have, the ability to coach others. But the real challenge for most sales leaders is that they have never been trained to coach. They literally perpetuate the way that they themselves were coached, which in 9 times out of 10 was, okay, watch me, son. This is how it's done. And they model it, which is very, very sad, because most sales teams in most organizations in most countries are crying out to be coached.
Absolutely. People during this pandemic time, I think people are craving those coaching conversations, looking for that encouragement and wanting the honest feedback on what they're doing well, but what they also can do to improve their conversations with customers.
Well, yeah. I mean, as you realized, throughout this interview / conversation, Lisa, the most important aspect of any commercial business is the customer. And, with the arrival of COVID, so many frontline sales professionals were forced to look back into their current best accounts to see if they could get some business from them, because they weren't identifying, even if they could gain access to new opportunities. And I find it really sad that it took a pandemic for that to happen. Because look, here's the harsh reality. If a company has been in business for more than 2 years, unless they're selling commodities, 80% of their business is going to come from their existing accounts. And yet, I bet you 99%, in fact, I'm certain 99% of organizations believe the most important aspect of commercial trading is to win new logos. And rather than spending 80% of their time looking after the clients that are giving them 80% of their business, they use that 80% to try and go and win new business. and only 20% protecting what they already have and building it out and developing it and consolidating it.
Absolutely. It's the most effective way to grow business is through your existing customers. Well, Jonathan, we're starting to get a couple of questions from the audience. And if anybody wants to post your questions to Jonathan, by all means, please put them in the chat box. So the first question that we have here is, it's from a salesperson who's just started their sales leadership role, and they're wanting to know what they can do to thrive and get past the 18 months.
Well, look, we can look at this from various aspects. The reality is that you've arrived in the sales leadership role, and it's good that you're putting your hand up and admitting that you've got a lot to learn. Because I've got to tell you this, I'm fairly old in the nicest possible way. I'm maturing nicely. And I still have a voracious appetite for learning. I believe the day that we stop learning, we lose our appetite for learning, we may as well pack up and go home, because we're working and living in a rapidly moving environment. And I think the first thing that sales leaders can do is to accept the responsibility for their own development. If they're not getting the funding they need to be taken off site and to be trained and coached effectively in that sales leadership role, then they've got to work with the mantra, if it's to be, it's up to me. Mm-hmm. Because, the reality is most sales managers are not receiving the support and guidance they need. And I would advise the questioner to get around the internet. There is more free advice. But don't accept advice on face value, for goodness sake. Look out the people that really know what they're talking about, that have been there. They've moved from bag carrier to sales manager, from sales manager to head of sales, from head of sales possibly to CEO even. But even more so, look for genuine people who have coached large numbers of sales managers, because you can seek out their opinion. You can get advice. It's all available to you today. Mm-hmm.
And Jonathan, here in Canada, we are so fortunate because our government, the Canadian government, has a program called Canadian Job Grants. And we are fortunate enough that as of April 1st, for the 7th year, they've actually offered funding for training here in Canada. It varies by province, but it is a great way for sales leaders to be able to get funding, because sometimes they're apprehensive to go to the CEO and be able to validate and justify. But this has been just a great government program that has really supported the initiatives of people being able to upskill their teams.
Yeah, we've got the similar sort of program that's about to kick off here in the UK, Lisa. And isn't it great? All of a sudden, sales is no longer a dirty word. It's something that we all do every day in some way. And it's great that it's now being recognized.
Absolutely. And Sandra Farrelly, later today from the CPSA, the Canadian Professional Sales Association, will be talking about how they're working closely with colleges and universities. And in our upcoming panel, we've actually got a recent business grad who was part of the Great Canadian Sales Competition. So it's nice to see that many grads are looking as sales as a viable career option.
Yeah. The final thing I'd add to that, Lisa, as you well know, I've gathered together 11 good chums, including you, who are going to, again, I mentioned it, Top Sales Leadership, which actually launches next week. And there's a wonderful section on there, and it's called the Advice Bureau. You can go in, type in a question, and you'll get a response from at least one of our 12 team members, our consultants, within 24 hours. And everything is free. So use it.
Absolutely. There's so many great resources available. And Jonathan, thank you very much. I'm greatly honored to be a part of that elite group of sales leaders who will be working with others to help raise the caliber of sales leaders and sales professionals. So, Jonathan, as we start to wrap things up here, what is your final advice for sales leaders to rethink sales beyond 2021?
Okay, well, look, I totally understand that in most organizations, sales leader role has become pivotal. They're driving the sales team, which is the company's engine room. And, if I can just give you some rather worrying stats very, very quickly. Some recent research that we at Sander Research Center carried out and discovered 43% of sales leaders do not receive effective training prior to taking up the role. Okay. 1 in 3 last less than 3 years. 32% replied that the ongoing training they receive is not effective or not very effective. 34% said that they're not effective or not very effective at coaching. And 12% believe that they're very effective. Yet this is the most critical sales leadership skill. So 12%. So in other words, 88% of sales managers believe that they're not effective at coaching. And that's something you touched on earlier, Lisa. Mm-hmm. I'll say it again, the sales leader's role has never been more critical. And in my opinion, the paucity of qualified, inspirational, experienced leaders is one of the main reasons why achievement levels continue to plummet. Only 48% of sales professionals achieved their number in 2019. We can't measure 2020 for all the reasons we understand, and we won't be able to measure 2021. But had a COVID not arrived, I promise you, only 45% of frontline sales professionals would have done quota in 2020. So the conclusion has to be most sales managers are not receiving the support and the guidance they need. And what's to be done? Well, I can only go back to what I said earlier. Accept responsibility, sales leaders. Work with the mantra. If it's to be, it's up to me. Go and find out what you need. If you want to last beyond 18 months, then it's in your hands. Absolutely.
Jonathan, thank you very, very much. This has been a great way to be able to kick things off. Bit of a reality check, but also you've provided a lot of hope to sales leaders on what they can do to transform sales teams, because we really, really do need to transform sales leaders to that level 3 of selling. I'm a huge advocate of that. And I know as it's my mission here at Teneo Results to be able to see that change during my career lifetime. So again, let's take a look at what we can do to be working with the sales community in order to be able to improve those stats and raise the caliber of sales leadership and sales professional, because that's exactly what we need in order to stimulate this economy. As you and I shared, Dave Curlin gave very candid advice last night about the economy, and what we want to be able to do is to have salespeople be really strong to continue to stimulate this economy and move forward.
Well, I totally agree with you, Lisa, and I'm very optimistic about the economy, having spoken to numerous experts. But I think, here's a clear message again for sales managers. You've got to be ready. So finally, when the curtain comes up, and it's going to very, very soon, whether it's the end of Q2 or the beginning of Q3, and we're going to enjoy some excellent trading years, you've got to be ready, because if you're not, your competitors will be, and there'll be a speck of dust in the distance, and you'll still be left on the starting blocks.
Yes.
So, don't lose a minute.
Very good. Excellent. Excellent. Well, we are going to continue things on because we need to get salespeople back into their seats, getting ready to actually prepare beyond 2021. So Jonathan, again, thank you very, very much for all your expertise, advice, and wisdom today. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, Lisa, and good luck with the rest of the event.
Absolutely.